I wanted to say, you know, Dr. Brad DeRoche, right?
Yes, yeah. That's where I first heard of Diamond, actually, was Brad.
Oh,
He
wow.
had one.
You know Abby Titus?
Yes, I haven't heard from her in a long time. Was she a student of Brad's?
Well, I'm getting to that. Do you know Bob Gruca?
Of course I know Bob, because he studied with me.
Well, you and I have all these connections together by gateway of Roger Humphrey. Roger Humphrey was my first guitar teacher, was Brad's first guitar teacher, Abby Titus's first guitar teacher, and Bob Gruca's first guitar teacher.
I see. That's right. Bob's from Michigan. Yes.
Yes. So we have that connection and I actually wanted to study with you at CIM, but because of complications in life and getting married kind of young, it had an effect on on career choices. But
Sure.
But yeah, my dream was actually to study with you at CIM because like I've been a big fan forever. So I just want to tell you that like I'm like out of the younger generation, like you're one of my guitar heroes, and I've been following you forever. And also like when I was in the parking lot of EMU, I heard the recording of you with Armin Kelly at NPR regarding guitars. Well, just wanted to mention that. But going back to you, your primary teachers were Jeremy Sparks and John Holmquist.
Yes.
You mentioned at your Grammy speech that Julian Bream and David Russell, that they're your guitar heroes, or some of your guitar heroes, at least classical guitar heroes. Yeah. Did you get a chance to perform in Masterclasses for either one of them?
Not for Bream. I met him briefly after a concert he played in Buffalo in 1988, and he signed. I think they had somehow we had gotten a flyer. Maybe it came with the program, one of the promotional flyers from Harold Shaw Management, who was managing him at the time, and he signed that for me, and I gave him like a demo cassette, which I had some pieces, about a half an hour of stuff that I'd done at a studio. So that was my only contact with him. I was looking at a receiving line for autographs. Russ David, I played for him many times, or several times, 3, I think. The first time I played for him, I was 11. I played Canarios by Gaspar Sanz. And then when I was, 13, he came to Rochester, New York. I'm originally from the Buffalo area. And that's where I was studying with Jeremy that whole time. The time I started, which was like, I think a week before my 8th birthday, and then all the way until I graduated high school. And then the Guitar Society of Rochester had a really strong kind of united scene in classical guitar and series, and they had a venue at Hochstein School of Music, which is really right. I think it's right around the corner from Eastman. And so, yeah, so Russell was there. I was 13. I played for him there. I think I played the Soar Opus 9 variations. And then I think and then it was 2 years later, this is my first flight I ever took. I went to the GFA in Arizona, Tempe, Arizona, and played for him in a duo with one of Frank Putz's students, Andy. And we played the L'Encouragement duo for him. So I had there was some good contact there, and he would talk with my parents and talk with Jeremy and this kind of thing. And that's kind of when I got an inkling in those days that from him or Carlos Barbosa Lima or Leona Boyd, all the those people I played for, Alice Arts in Rochester at the Guitar Society of Rochester, headed by John Wiesenthal, and we should really credit him for the energy that he put into that series and that community. And just playing for those, that's when you kind of got this inkling, because they would always want to talk to my parents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was kind of, just that, and it's funny, from people that were based outside of America, they would say, well, he had already, they would say things like, he would probably already be playing in Europe right now. But we never paid too much attention to that, because when someone like David Russell said you have to work on your fourth finger, your left hand fourth finger, and being able to control it. When you're 13, you're a little bit wild. You're just kind of playing and just enjoying playing music, and then I really took that kind of stuff seriously. So I never felt like at any time. Well, I still don't really feel at any moment like a finished product. So that sort of remains to this day. But yeah, David was a huge influence in that. I think Bream as on recordings for me, because that's the only way I could kind of know anything about him was his recordings, right? But then hearing David Russell live in this hall at Hochstein Music School was kind of like a life-changing event, because I just never heard anybody play like that, until that, and the several performances after that. Like, it wasn't a fluke. It was like, no, this guy basically plays like this, on this. I was like another level, to me. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, he's phenomenal. He's
He's
phenomenal.
a nice guy too. He and Maria are really great, just great people.
Totally agree. Yeah, I met them here. They're cool.
Yeah.
But as a concert artist that you are, and a professor at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and from teaching masterclasses all over the world, what are the most common issues that you see with students?
It's getting better. It's getting better, but even from the very start, I couldn't articulate this as well in master classes when I was in my 20s, because I was still, I think I was a pretty good teacher for my age, but I naturally, like, as a human being, as you have more life experiences, and then you begin to be able to sort of focus what you're saying, and you can explain it a bit better and more succinctly. But I think still there's this kind of lingering thing with guitar players, that they spend a lot of time on the physicality of playing, which is totally understandable, because this is like really, really hard thing to do. It's really, really hard. I think what a lot of classical guitarists forget is that it's really, really hard for 95 to 99% of the human population to play Lagrima, okay, right? And I think that I have that perspective as a teacher, from over 25 years of touring and teaching. But the thing that is still sort of lingering, it's like I said, it's gotten a lot better in the last 20 years. But guitarists spend a lot of time on the physicality, the physical things that they focus on about playing, but they don't invest a lot of time in actual music study and actually how music is put together. And now those chickens are kind of coming home to roost, right? Because then when you hear somebody who really does know how music is put together, like Zoran Dukic, for example, or Lorenzo Michele, these kind of players, then it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like there's lots. I mean, there's probably gobs of players. Ricardo Gallen is another example that I think. Fabio Zanon, that really kind of know how music sounds, and their interpretation is informed by a knowledge of how music functions harmonically, melodically, rhythmically, form and structure, this kind of thing. But 30 years ago, I kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of playing like that. It was kind of like, it was like a personal interpretation. And then as long as somebody played with a lot of their personal feeling, then that sort of was, okay, well, then this is good. Or that player plays with a lot of feeling, but they don't have a lot of technique. Or, there was that whole kind of thing going around. Or that person plays with a lot of technique, but they play a little bit cold or whatever, or more clinical. And see now, like I said, like we kind of see that kind of thing was all a bit of mythology. There's probably 50 times the number of players that I can even think of that are playing in this manner. where all of those things are they're basically synthesized. It's like a holistic approach. And so I think, like I said, it's a lot better, but we still have a ways to go.
What do you look for in prospective students at CIM?
Again, a good kind of cross section. Like, so a student doesn't necessarily have to be like the fastest player or the flashiest player. Sometimes, like if you have sometimes that mythology is true. Sometimes you get a really fast player or a flashy player and they don't know a whole lot about music, or it's their interest in music centers around playing fast or something, or playing difficult pieces well, like as a guitar player, but not much else, right? And then you have the other, if you can imagine the 180 extreme to that, and then there's everything in between. Like if someone has good enough physical talent or sort of like physical ability on the instrument, but they also have this other kind of thing where they have a sensitivity to the aforementioned rhythm, melody, form and structure of music. Like they have kind of like what they call in sports, like a basketball IQ, as opposed to just being able to shoot, right? Or that kind of thing. Like they see the floor, they see plays develop before they happen, type of stuff, right? Like if they have that kind of thing, then I can work with them on their technical deficiencies. That's very easy for me to do, like as a teacher, because I just have a lot of not for any other reason other than I have a lot of experience in it. I've just been doing it for so long. So I can work with somebody that's maybe not even fully technically developed if they've got enough of these kind of other things going on, right? And that's so I'm more looking for people like that, particularly at Cleveland. The ones that get into the finals of the Curtis Institute, the Curtis Institute of Music, like auditions, they're already pretty much playing they're somewhere at or near what I'm trying to quantify it. Like, be careful about what I say, but like at or near what most classical guitarists would consider a professional level, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a different kind of criterion from most, music schools, that type of thing. So where Cleveland, we have like outstanding sort of talents that have come through Cleveland Institute of Music as well, but it's just a different setup. It's a different situation. So at Cleveland, I'm kind of looking for more something like where they've got a lot of stuff, they've got a lot of basketball IQ, you know what I mean? Like they've got a lot, they've got a lot of a sense of a lot of the things that put music together in addition to working on their technique, a kind of a musical intelligence or a sensitivity in that. Those are fun students to work with, because when you get all of those things going, they're all working together, man, their improvement just goes through the roof, So they don't have to be like, they don't have to necessarily have a lot of chops right away.
Nice. Well, I wanted to talk for a minute about your influences, because I was actually talking with my violinist who actually used to play with Julian Lebreau, back in Detroit. Yes, him and I talk about, we kind of, we have a lot of connections in me. Julian Lebreau with my violinist and everything, but I was talking to Nathan Samuelak, and we were discussing about influences on music, because like he grew up listening to a lot of jazz, but he plays classical violin. He's like big on Miles Davis, and then I was about my not really my influences, but the music that I grew up with. I grew up with a lot of Bob Dylan. I grew up with Neil Young, more stuff like that, and then you see like the Romeros, they grew up with a lot of flamenco, and you can hear that in their playing. It's very palpable. Right. And then Julian Bream, who you and I both love. We love Julian Bream. Julian, listening to Django Reinhardt, and he mentioned about how that affected his vibrato, listening to Django. So
Yeah,
You
and also
mentioned interviews.
and Bream could actually blow too. He could actually blow over changes and stuff like that. A lot of people don't know that about him. He's like a real. I mean, again, that's sort of self-evident to kind of in his playing. Like you just hear a musician, when he's playing. So yeah.
His improvisational skills and just everything. He was amazing. But you mentioned in interviews that you grew up listening to Public Enemy and A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
How does that music that you listened to growing up affect you as an artist? And do you think it's palpable somehow in the way in your performance or anything? Do you anything? I don't know.
No, I mean, I think actually for me, like as someone in my 40s now, I still listen to those records every once in a while. Like if I visit my brother in Buffalo, like we'll put on like Fear of a Black Planet and like listen to the really good tracks off of that, like Welcome to the Terror Dome and Brother's Gonna Work It Out and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I still remember the songs. I think see, like you must understand, you see. All right. Like Jimmy Page. Well, you must understand, you see. Like it's kind of like but you must understand. Like at that time, like for your younger viewers, like that music was really kind of like in 1987, 88, 89, like really cutting edge, and it was on the fringes of popular music because it sold a lot of copies, but it wasn't yet popular music. This is still when hip hop was kind of like it was on its way to kind of moving into, it's a slow process, like kind of the approaching the mainstream and then really taking over the mainstream, right, as we saw in the aughts. But at that time in the late 80s, like it was kind of like what rock and roll was in the 50s or what jazz would have been in the 30s, in the 1930s. It hadn't reached the kind of the apotheosis where it became part of like the pop culture landscape or pop culture in general, which I'm always a little ambivalent about anyway as an adult, is pop culture in general. I'm a little bit more, I'm a little apprehensive about it sometimes, even though I love certain aspects of it. So like, but to me, like now as an adult, I hear a lot of those records actually as an extension of a modern extension at that time, or a contemporary extension at that time, of R&B and soul records that I listened to when I was 3, like Aretha Franklin or Wilson Pickett, and James Brown. Of course, James Brown was kind of like their primary thing. They were sampling him right and left, and the jazz records. I like why Tribe Called Quest was a really fresh thing, because Q-Tip and Ali Shaheed Muhammad were sampling jazz records like Weather Report and Roy Ayers and stuff like that. So I had that sound in my ear because my dad's record collection was entirely jazz, only jazz, when I was 3, and I would listen to these records. And then my mom's record was mostly soul and R&B records that she would have said at the time, like records that you could dance to. I like that music because I can dance to it. My mother really could dance to that stuff. She had a really great sense of it, of its rhythmic and sort of dance properties, if you will. None of that, I don't think, really reaches into my study of classical music. I don't make any effort, and I've said this before in other interviews, I don't make any effort to try to reconcile or to fuse or anything like that into my Bach, into say playing Bach. And I doubt very much that Julian Bream had any thoughts about Django when he was studying Bach. I just don't. I mean, maybe he would have thought that he did, or I don't know. But I just can say from my perspective, like it's like I think of that as popular music on a cutting edge of a certain time, and I know there's like Drake and Kendrick Lamar now, and they're carrying on a kind of and Kanye and stuff like that. And I'm very interested in Kanye, what he does, and it comes from a kind of, now it has a tradition, just like fusion jazz and progressive rock and metal and this kind of thing, and they all have these kind of like these quirky traditions that carry on. I don't think people say, well, you love metal, Jason. It's like, well, I like some metal artists, I like artists. I'm not a big like metalhead or a big hip hop head. So when I'm studying Bach or Albani, like if I'm practicing Albani's for some like one-off where I'm playing, like I played somewhere last year or the year before, then I gotta put some of the stuff. So I'll bring out those Albani's, arrangements, whatever. When I'm working on those, I'm all over again, just trying to inhabit whatever I can have gleaned from what it is to play Spanish classical music, because even those pieces are not Spanish music of the street, right? I mean, actually, you could probably speak to this a lot more with more authority than I could. I'm an American, but like even that kind of stuff is like Albani's to my ear and to my knowledge of reading about him. What he was doing was a kind of a fusion of Central European music fused with a lot of folk idioms of Spanish music of the people, that type of thing. And that's how he created his own special voice. So I just try to inhabit that. Like, I'm just trying to go for that. I'm not thinking of Bach that much at all, when I'm playing Albani's. So I don't know. That's
totally.
That's a long way of answering the Public Enemy question, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about your recordings also a little bit. Touch upon on your albums, you've got like a very natural flow between the transitions of the pieces, and I was wondering about like how involved are you in the process of the sequencing of your records?
Quite a bit. I mean, that's my producer and I on all those records, like any of the solo records, Zika, and when I made the one with Norbert Kraft and Bonnie Silver for Naxos. Yeah, I mean, you definitely. I mean, what was great about working with Norbert then on that one record in '96, which I get a lot of questions about from fans and fans of classical guitar. What was great about them is they really were very artist driven in that sense, and so that was my kind of one of my first experiences of like the whole thing of sequencing. But the album I made before that wasn't on a label, that was just to sell on my GFA tour in '93, that was my producer that I've worked with in Zika the last 20 years, Alan Bice. And so that was a project. Alan Bice and Jim Bonney. Jim Bonney's also still in the music business as a composer and producer and engineer. And he was a guitarist in the studio with me with John Holmquist when I was an undergrad. And they approached me in '92 before I did the GFA tour, the Guitar Foundation of America tour, for some of the listeners that may not know so much about the guitar thing. They approached me. They said, well, you should have a CD. You should have your own compact disc or whatever to sell on the tour. I was like, really? Like, wow. So Alan, right? So Alan Bice, then later on after Naxos, around the 2000, he was working in Dallas at the time for a radio firm. The remasters of a lot of those 50s and 60s rock and roll singles were done by Alan. So again, Alan's another one that knows a lot about other. So he and I, our friendship has a lot of that in it too. He's a huge Elvis, he's one of the biggest Elvis fans I've ever met. So then we started the thing with Zika with Bruce's company, Bruce Egri, and he studied under Bruce, and we're all in Cleveland, and so we made the Ponce record, right? So okay, Ponce, Albani's, Matheny, Images of Matheny, then there's the Bach, and then I had the other side projects kind of thing around it, or the collaborations with Gary Shocker, and then things kind of progressed from there. Yes. To your question about sequencing of those records, what order to put the Ponce sonatas in. Yeah, I mean, again, I have a lot of input on that, but also I very much want Alan's ear on that as well. So Alan and I sequence Play, for example, the 2014 record. That was harder to sequence because you're not working with 5 sonatas or 4 suites, 4 box suites. You're working now with like 18 individual tracks, like a pop record in a sense, that type of thing. So yeah, we had some back and forths over that. We like the Ellington, the decision to put the Ellington at the end of the record is like definitely something that we both were like, yeah, that's gonna just cap it off real nice, because we know a lot of the sequencing of our favorite pop and rock records,